Hello. In this video, I want to talk about how to go about writing up your case study. So we'll start with, if we look at my screen, I'm in under the modules, and under the start here, you'll notice that there's all kinds of things here about homework or case studies. But let's look at our first one here's an example I did for Anna O. What you'll see is here's a description of the issues Anna O was having. Now keep in mind this is a much more complicated case study than I'll give you for your homework assignments. But I thought if I did a more complicated example that it would be it could help you more because I could go into more detail, more depth, and give you a richer idea. So here's what I did. So it will seem like it'll seem strange the way I did this, but I think it will help you understand it. As I was reading it, after I read it, I went back and I highlighted it using different colors. Now at the bottom of the document it explains what different colors are, but basically I was using these for different categories of symptoms. And this was something that I thought would be helpful for you to understand my thought process. So the purpose of all this annotation that I'm doing on this is to help you kind of walk through how I mentally came up with the diagnosis. Alright, so then at the bottom you'll see this analysis of Anna O is not what you would be turning in as your homework assignment. This is just to help you understand my thought process. As you can see, I use the different colors for the different, like I use yellow for physical symptoms, I use green for psychotic symptoms, and I use blue for depressive symptoms. And I also use pink to support any certain points. Next, what we're looking at, next part is walking you through what's called a decision tree. And a decision tree is basically a series of yes/no questions, and it helps you branch off. So if you answer yes, you move down here, and then you got another question underneath that, and that's related to the first one. And then if you do yes, you go here. If you do no, you go here. And it's just a way to help people make decisions. And I recreated this in a kind of hopefully a simpler format. Now in here you'll see it's referred to as a diagnostic assistant. When you actually let me just open this up again. When you actually go through and look at this section, you'll see it's actually called YOFI, the diagnostic assistant. So this is the same thing, I just renamed it. So let's just kind of look at what this does. Now as you'll read here, the name comes from, this was the name of Freud's dog. So if you click down here to visit YOFI, what you're going to be doing is you're basically doing this decision tree process. So you get down to the bottom here, you click Start Room. Now you have to start off with a category. This will be easier for you because your case studies, the principal diagnosis of the person in the case study is always going to be the chapter we're covering. So I'm not going to expect you to know diagnoses that we haven't covered yet, obviously. And the main diagnosis is not going to be something we've covered in a past chapter. It's going to be the chapter we're on. So that's where you kind of start. So if you look at each category, we have a question to answer, like anxiety disorders. Do the symptoms primarily involve anxiety, fear, avoidance, or increased arousal? If you think that's true, you click on the anxiety disorders link. If you don't, you move down, read the next one, and keep going until one of these statements sounds like it's true. So let's just do anxiety disorders for simplicity. So now you're in the anxiety disorders room. And again, it sounds strange to be room. This software I used to create this decision tree was really made to be kind of a text-based game where you'd explore like a dungeon or different rooms and decide what you're going to do. Like there's a treasure chest in the corner. What do you do? Those type of things. But I used that software because it was the only software I could find that would do this branching type of thing that I'm doing here. Okay, so you start off with the first thing. Are the symptoms due to the direct physiological effects of a general medical condition? And if you're thinking, no, that's not true. So if you answer no, you move down. If you answer yes, you just click the link in front of it. So we're going to just pick the third one. Okay, now it says your client probably has a phobic disorder. So proceed to the phobia room to discern which subtype of phobic disorder the individual has. So you just click here, and the same thing. Do the symptoms involve fear stimulated by a specific object or situation? If that's true, click on the link. If it's not, move down. If you think it involves fear of humiliation or embarrassment in social or performance situation, you think, yeah, that sounds like it. Click that link, and it says your diagnosis may be social anxiety disorder. And if you're thinking that's not right, you can click one of these options and go back and start over. So the point of this is that with this decision tree, it will give you the correct diagnosis if you answer the questions correctly. So if you answer yes to one of these questions when it should have been no, or vice versa, you're going to get the wrong diagnosis. So this is what can kind of help you work your way through it. And that's all I did basically here with these questions. Answering no, physical complaints, so forth, and I work my way down to a diagnosis. Now, when you do write up your case study, you're going to be using a form. Let me just go back to it here. You'll notice that there's two versions of it. If you prefer using Microsoft Word, you can download the file and do it, or here is a version of it in Google Docs. It doesn't matter because you're going to save them as a PDF and upload that anyway. Okay, so this is what the form looks like. Now the reason for having you fill out a form rather than just write up stuff is it makes it easier for me to grade these because I can see if you've hit the important points, and it also simulates the experience of actually doing a real diagnosis. So if you really were like an intake clinician, you would be filling out some kind of form on each client you saw and about their diagnosis and so forth. So this is trying to simulate that process. So it's trying to give you an experience of you being the person who makes the diagnosis. So as you can see here, you put the person's name in, and then you put the principal diagnosis. Now the principal diagnosis is going to be the main problem that they present when they come to you. So the main thing they're kind of complaining about. So if we go back to, oops, not that one. Let's go back to how you would write up Anna O's case study. So for Anna O, now this is an older form. I didn't have all the descriptions that you're going to see in a moment underneath these, but it's the same basic thing. Our principal diagnosis for Anna O is conversion disorder. And so that's the main problem she seems to be having. Now you'll notice next thing is additional diagnosis. Sometimes people have more than one disorder, and you would list those there. Now you'll notice as it says, sometimes it might tell you in the case study, this person has been previously diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. If that's the case, you would put generalized anxiety disorder under additional diagnoses, and in parentheses, you would put diagnosed from history. The reason you put that phrase is that tells the reader that you didn't make the diagnosis, that was already pre-existing. So if anybody was to question your diagnosis, they wouldn't question that because you didn't make the diagnosis. All right, general medical condition. Sometimes people have difficulty with this one. All we're looking for here is whether or not they have some kind of medical issue. So for example, with Anna O, we see she didn't have anything. So by medical conditions, we're talking about things like asthma, diabetes, those type of things. Now, let's say their principal diagnosis is depression, and they mentioned they're having trouble sleeping. You wouldn't put insomnia under general medical condition because you would know that having trouble sleeping is a symptom of depression, and so that's not a standalone medical condition. That's something that's part of the symptoms of the psychological disorder they have. So this is only for medical conditions that are unrelated to the psychological disorder. Now, the reason we put something in here is if whoever's going to do treatment, they might need to know if the person has other conditions, because that might make a difference in what they do as far as if they're going to use some kind of medication. Now, the next part is looking at problems with their life. Now, they may not have something for every single one, so don't worry about if they don't. So in some cases, you're just going to write none. But I tried to put an example, a description of what each of these categories mean. So problems with the primary support group. Think about that's the important people in their life. Their family, their friends, significant others. Are those people willing to be there and help them work through and deal with their psychological disorder? And if they're not, then you want to mention that. Like maybe there's a husband that says, you know what, I'm tired of dealing with my wife. I'm tired of her problems. I've given up. I've tried helping all these years and nothing's worked, so I quit. Well, that would be a problem with the primary support group because he's not willing to help out. So you would just write a sentence or two saying the husband is not willing to help out with her treatment anymore, blah, blah, blah. So you don't have to write a paragraph or anything, but just write a sentence or two. And please write incomplete sentences. Nothing I hate more than just putting a phrase like husband uncooperative. That's not very descriptive. Put a sentence. It's not that hard. Problems related to the social environment. Same thing there. Maybe it mentions the person doesn't seem to have any friends, doesn't have a social life. Well, that's an issue. Educational problems. Any problems with their school history. Occupational. Are there psychological problems spilling over into their work life? Now, housing problems is one sometimes people kind of misunderstand. What we're looking at is, do they have housing? So do they have a place to live, and is it adequate? So as you notice, maybe they're homeless, maybe they live in a neighborhood that's not safe. That would be a housing problem. And so we list these things because that might help explain why the person has a disorder they do. Any economic problems? And here's another one people have difficulty with, problems with healthcare access. This is talking about, are they having any difficulty getting the help they need? So maybe they don't have insurance, and that's made it difficult for them to get help. Or maybe their employer's plan doesn't cover certain things. That's really what we're kind of looking at. Or like it says here, maybe they don't have a car and they can't get to the medical care. Any problems with the law? And then here, just any other problems. And then the meat of your paper is going to be, why is this person, what is your diagnosis and what's the reasons for it? So for example, here I put Anna's principal diagnosis is conversion disorder because she has physical symptoms for which neurologists could not find any organic basis. So I identify the diagnosis, and then I go on and I start providing evidence for that. So the easiest way to provide evidence for that is to look at the criteria. What are the criteria for the disorder? Once you know the criteria, start looking for examples. And that's kind of where, I don't have it here now, but if you look back at the original Anna O problem, and I highlighted stuff in different colors, that was kind of what I went back and used to write my support. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to tell me which of the symptoms that person has that fits the diagnosis you made. And then again, so just kind of looking through, explaining things. So it doesn't have to be, like pages and pages, but explain stuff in enough detail that I know you understand the diagnosis, and that I can clearly believe you, that from your reasoning I can say, yeah, this is the problem. This is why the person has that diagnosis. Now, the other thing you'll notice at the very bottom of this form that isn't on the other one is, for every homework, for each of the case studies, I want you to just kind of estimate how long do you think it was going to take you to do it, and do the same thing afterwards. And then fill out this little table. Now, the point of this part isn't graded, this evaluation, self-evaluation, but I want you to be honest, and then you rate yourself in each of these. How well do you think you understood the psychological disorder? How clear did you think you explained things? I mean, was it clear? And how was the quality? Was it a good explanation? Did you provide support for it? And you're rating that on a 0 to 10 scale. And the same thing with all these. So if you rate this, then when I grade it, I'll rate this. My ratings aren't going to directly translate into a certain grade, but think of them as feedback. So, like if you thought your understanding of the disorder was a 6, and I was like, no, it really was an 8. You really did pretty well. You understood it. The point of this is it's going to help you calibrate your expectations to mine. And I think that's helpful, because I've read some research where people are bad at estimating time it takes to do something, and self-evaluation, that we're not always that good at self-evaluation. So the whole point of this ending part is to help you get some practice of that. So you rate yourself first, and then you'll see my rating, and then you can compare the two, and you can see, okay, well, he thought my explanations need to be a little more supported. All right, now I know what I can do next time. So that's the whole point of these tables, or this table, is to help you get better at knowing what I expect. And so again, also, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me and ask me questions. I'm willing to look at rough drafts of your case studies and so forth. So take advantage of that. And if you have any questions, let me know. And I think you will enjoy doing these case studies, because it really gives you some hands-on experience of what it's like to make a diagnosis.